Here in studio, and joining me is none other than Dr. Francis Mading Deng, who is an ambassador at large, also a South Sudanese scholar and author, and also John Gashir, who is a regional affairs analyst. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on Bottomline Africa. I'll start with you, Ambassador. On July 9th of 2011, celebrations were all over in South Sudan. People hoping for a new start. 10 years down the line, is there anything to celebrate?
Well, there is, of course, something to celebrate in the sense that South Sudan is independent. But to appreciate exactly where the problems come from, we have to go back a bit and understand the struggle itself and how we ultimately succeeded in having independence. The journey to the independence of South Sudan was a very difficult one. I was myself very much connected to the developments. Even before the independence came, I had been for years in the United Nations involved with internal displacement as representative of the Secretary General on internal displaced persons, which was a global mandate. And then towards the end of the struggle, I was the special advisor of the Secretary General on the prevention of genocide. And I witnessed how the international community was reacting to the principle of self-determination and the prospects of independence. There was a strong opposition, even among those who were very sympathetic to the cause of the South, both in Africa and in the world. People thought that South Sudan would be a failed state. It would be torn apart by internal ethnic conflicts. It would be a very bad example to Africa, and might even be a destabilizing factor in the region. Now, the question was, why was that? Was this going to be an internal problem, or were there external forces that were influencing the outcome? And in many ways, there were, of course, forces that were using this as an argument against the independence of the South, but also intending it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they did not want the South to become independent. And I have to say that South Sudan had friends, particularly towards the end, who stood for giving self-determination credibility, having it held on time, and respecting the will of the people of South Sudan. And it was really a last-minute decision for all the leaders of the world within the United Nations coming together to proceed with the exercise of self-determination. And I must say, as you said before, it was a tremendous occasion. I came with the Secretary General to attend the Independence Day. It was unbelievable how in the heat of Africa, people came early in the morning, celebrated until dawn, tremendous jubilation, very well-earned independence after decades of terrible struggle and sacrifices. The Secretary General said, and I was part of his leadership in the UN, he said South Sudan would be my #1 priority. And UNMISS, United Nations mission in South Sudan, was envisaged as an operation that would literally be involved in all aspects of building South Sudan. It was a moment of great expectation and optimism. Now you will be leading to the next question: what happened? What went wrong? I would like to say, before I even get into the details, that we must accept the fact that the dynamics in South Sudan have been closely connected with external forces. South Sudanese struggled for their independence, but the world was also very helpful, particularly in Africa, countries of the region, AU, and friends of South Sudan, including what became known as the Troika, that is US, UK, and Norway, and of course the United Nations. So when we look at the problems of South Sudan today, we have to look back at how did we get to where we are. It was a combination of internal forces, external support, with a lot of skepticism, and people who did not want South Sudan to be independent, and probably were projecting or predicting the kind of things that unfortunately we see today. Okay. So it was somewhat influenced by all those factors. We can then talk about why and where we are now, what happened.
All right, maybe let me just throw it to John, picking up from the ambassador, of course. What do you think are the hits and misses?
Yeah, thank you. I would say that the biggest miss and hit has been the perhaps the return of violence along ethnic, along political lines and divisions. And I would say that, in my view, perhaps to differ with the ambassador, is that the biggest problem in South Sudan for me, from where I stand, is the failure of leadership. And that cuts right across, be it within the SPLM, SPLA, within the SPLM in opposition or wherever. I think it's a question of the leadership failing to really accept that South Sudan had had enough of the problems, and that 10 years down the road, we are still not anywhere near that what was witnessed 10 years ago when South Sudan became independent. It's a sad thing, and I think it's really an issue of internal failure of leadership, and of course the failure of the international community not to put enough political, economic, military and security sanctions against the entire leadership at the top in South Sudan.
Actually, people describe that as South Sudanese people went from hope to despair. But I'll allow the ambassador to just come in and comment about that. Do you think it's the failure of leadership that South Sudan is where it is right now?
You know, I've been thinking about this. There's a lot of talk about lack of political will. And I think of political will as something that could be positive or negative. When we speak of lack of political will, we are implying the negative side of it. We could generate a political will that is more positive, or a political will that's negative. Now, what we have is a situation where you have a peace process that is, in essence, really a dialogue among warriors. It's a war talk rather than a genuine goodwill talk. And in this war talk, parties to the conflict are negotiating not...
Ambassador, allow me to cut you short.
Absolutely.
Sorry for that. We just want to cross over to State House. President Uhuru Kenyatta is currently speaking. Remember, the Kenya National Olympics team had gone there to receive the national flag. Let's just listen in.
Athletes, my only request is that you be great ambassadors for your country. Request you to work hard and together as Team Kenya towards building a stronger sporting sector and bringing glory to your country, which I believe thereafter will inspire and nurture those who will come in the future. Finally, on my own behalf, on behalf of the government, on behalf of the people of Kenya, I wish to each and every one of you success as you head to Tokyo, and we all look forward to welcoming you back home and celebrate your wins at the 2020 Olympics. We are proud of all of you. Mine is just that you hold yourself with the right dignity. We want to play fair sport. We want you to look after yourselves, and we want you just to do your best. That is all. And also to our officials who will be accompanying them, we also expect the same from you as well, that you will also look after these young men and women. You will also look after yourself, and you also have a responsibility to ensure that we maintain the dignity and the reputation of Kenya's sportsmen and women. And I would also like to say that as you move and you put together your managers and all your technical teams, we want to ensure, so that we are properly sorted, that there is equal representation of men and women. Even if I look now, there's too many men. Where are the women? Yeah. And we must have that. We must have our athletes also having a good blend, so that they are able to communicate and to deal with any issues that arise with our athletes. And I think that we need to encourage that and make sure we keep that balance, not just for the sportsmen and women. They have their different and varied sports, but our technical teams also need to also have that kind of balanced representation in order to ensure that the interests and the concerns and the welfare of our sporting fraternity and our young men and women is properly catered for. Kwa hayo machache na mengi, Mungu awabariki, awaongoze. Tunawagojea na tunatarajia makubwa. Yeah? If I can see the rugby people walking on a catwalk, it means you are well prepared for the events that are ahead of you. Best of luck. Mungu awabariki. Asante.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, we shall now present a replica jersey for Team Kenya. Thank you, Excellency. And now we shall request that you please present the Kenya flag to our team captain, Andrew Amonde. Thank you, Your Excellency. I shall now request that we have a series of pictures, Your Excellency. Because of COVID protocols, Your Excellency, we won't have the full squad. We have a select few who shall be here. So, Daktari, if you can just bring them up.
Those are live pictures from State House there. President Uhuru Kenyatta presenting to the Kenya National Olympics team the national flag ahead of those Olympics that are supposed to be held in Tokyo, Japan. Of course, he's mentioned a number of things, apart from the fact that he's wishing them success, that there needs to be a blend when it comes to sporty action. Not just men, but also women should be included in the same. And of course, he has been given that national uniform, the new in Team Kenya uniform. But I want us to come back to studio. We were having that conversation on the South Sudan independence celebration. That is 10 years of independence is set to happen tomorrow. Joining me in studio, Dr. Francis Mading Deng, who is a South Sudanese scholar and author, also an ambassador at large, and also John Gashia, regional affairs analyst. Sorry to cut you short earlier on, but you were speaking about the fact that these are warriors having discussion on a peace deal. If I let you just pick it up from there, Ambassador.
Right. Thank you very much. As I was saying, we focus very much on the idea of lack of political will, failure of leadership. I want to look at this from a slightly different point of view. And that is to say, first of all, the international community has continued to be involved in the situation in South Sudan, both as a region, beginning with IGAD, the sub-region, AU, African Union, and the international community. What has been going on was an attempt to bring the warring parties to talk. And the talk has focused very much on how they share power and basically security as it relates to power sharing. That would be the first two chapters of the revitalized peace agreement. All the other chapters that deal with the conditions in the country as a whole, going down to the local level, are not being catered for. What I would want to focus on is assume that leaders must have good intentions for their people. We cannot say that a leader who has struggled for all these decades and has now assumed leadership for the country can be assumed to have no political will to do what is good for the country. So why don't we start from the premise of that there is a problem. And this problem is a combination of internal forces and external intervention or contribution. If we agree that we are talking as people who share a common ground, who share a common vision for the country, both leaders of the country as well as international partners, then we should sit and dialogue as people who want the same thing for the country. Okay. It becomes then a contact, what I would term war talk, into genuine goodwill talk with people on the same page, dealing with a common problem that we all want to end. We're looking for how best to end it in partnership with our international partners and friends.
Okay, John, you're the one who mentioned that there is failure of leadership, and looking at the journey of South Sudan, the peace deal that is currently being implemented at a very slow rate, actually. Do you think it is the much-needed silver bullet for the country?
I wish I would say that, but I have my own very perhaps strong reservations after following South Sudan for a long time. Mm-hmm. The political situation, as the ambassador is talking about, that the current peace talk has revolved around more or less the warriors, the warring parties, and what have you. But my own take is that really South Sudan is at the precipice. It's at the cusp of a great opportunity. But this can only happen if there is enough political goodwill amongst the leadership, because the kind of polarization, the kind of divisions, the kind of infighting, the kind of power struggles. And indeed, South Sudan is expected to be having an election next year.
Yeah, and 2023 actually.
I think 2023 or 2020. But you get the same issues that are at the core of this, is power sharing amongst what perhaps the ambassador is talking about, the warriors. But for me, the issue is not that the warriors want to fight. I think it's more so the leadership. The leaders themselves want to hog onto power. There is succession planning, and there is perhaps the bigger issue in the room. There's a lot of corruption within South Sudan. Indeed, the issue of external and internal issues, they all begin, in my view, with the leadership. And so far, over the last 10 years, the top political leadership in South Sudan has failed to display, for lack of a better term, patriotism, despite them having fought for over 50 years. What you see at the moment is factions. Dr. Riek Machar, President Salva Kiir, the first Vice President Wani, and all these people. They are all, in my view, and perhaps the ambassador might not want to say that, but I think they are all, in my view, really at the tip of what we call different warring factions that are fighting for power and are using the innocent civilians and the young warriors to seek a political gain at the expense of the country. And they have been saying, I'm saying this, if you look at Dr. Riek Machar, look at President Salva Kiir, they have and they were at the core of this South Sudan People's Liberation Movement. Yes. They've been there for the last 30, 40 years. They are all very senior political leaders, but they have allowed the entire security apparatus, the entire political apparatus in South Sudan to be divided along ethnic groups. And that is what we are having at the moment, is a contestation between various different groups to try and capture power. And for me, for the people of South Sudan, as they are celebrating their 10th year, there isn't much that they can put on the table, despite and in spite of a lot of political goodwill that was provided from the region, the international community. Now, the external forces are always there, but I think for me, the bottom line is that the political leadership in South Sudan must make and take a decisive decision to allow the people of South Sudan to enjoy what they really fought for the last 50 years. That was human dignity.
I want you to stay on that note, because I want to just follow up on that. Do you think the ESC has done enough to salvage the situation in South Sudan?
I have my own reservations, and I would say one. The East African community, as indeed IGAD, as indeed the African Union, perhaps there are a lot of vested interest within the IGAD on South Sudan. There are a lot of vested interest within the African Union to do with South Sudan. There are a lot of vested interest within the East African community to do with South Sudan. Let's lay down. we have Ethiopia, we have Sudan, we have Kenya, we have Uganda, and we have DRC. If you look at these countries, political alignments and political involvement in terms of what is happening at the moment, perhaps, for lack of a better term, is only possibly, and I would say this very advisedly, is only possibly Kenya that is not actively engaged in supporting either or one of the different political factions in South Sudan. But for Kenya itself, Kenya has allowed, as it were, a lot of all this, what I would call, people against the people of South Sudan, political leverage and sanctuary in Nairobi. But if you look at Museveni, if you look at Sudan, if you look at Ethiopia, a lot of all these rival groups, they import their arms, they import their whatever through these different countries. Now, when you talk about the Troika, for this matter, the Troika, you're talking about Britain, you're talking about the US, you're talking about Norway. The US and Britain, they have a lot of political, military, economic interests that they can and leverage that they can bring to bear on the political leadership. We haven't seen that. So indeed, is there a conspiracy, as it were, or collusion between the political leadership and the regional leadership? Museveni, you're talking about Abiy, you're talking about Tshisekedi, you're talking about the government in Sudan. I wouldn't talk about Kenya in particular, but I think Kenya also needed to really act more forcefully in terms of perhaps closing out all this, what I would call warriors coming into Nairobi for rest and recreation after they have committed all sorts of attacks and heinous crimes against humanity, and then they come to Nairobi to unwind, so to speak, and to have their hair cut.
Okay.
It's quite disgusting, to put it that mildly.
Okay, this has just gotten interesting. I want us to take a short break. When we come back, of course, we're going to look at the solutions. So now we know what the problem is. How do we bring cohesion to the nation, considering that the citizens are going through drought, food insecurity, not forgetting the refugee situation? We take a short break. I leave you with Destination Africa.